Hi, I'm Kirsten Grind. I'm the co-author with Catherine Sayre of Happy at Any Cost, the revolutionary vision and fatal quest of ZAPPOS CEO Tony Hsieh. And I'm very excited to be speaking at the San Diego Writers Festival on October 8th.
The title of your book is Happy at Any Cost, and it's the story of ZAPPOS CEO Tony Hsieh.
Tony Hsieh, yeah.
And I was watching a little bit about the story, and I'm curious about your book because I know that you're going to go a little deeper than the news stories go, maybe have a little more information, to say the least. So can you maybe start by briefly telling us about your book and why you wrote it?
Definitely. So Tony Hsieh was a very famous entrepreneur for several reasons. He was the CEO of ZAPPOS.com. I'm sure everyone knows that shoe company, as well as a big developer in downtown Las Vegas. He also was big about lifting up other entrepreneurs. So he was very well known, very young, only in his mid 40s. And he unfortunately had some undiagnosed mental health issues, and also, kind of towards the end of his life was dabbling in drugs and alcohol. And so he died quite young in a mysterious house fire in 2020. And so this book looks at not just the rise of Tony Hsieh and his wonderful life, it looks at, unfortunately, his downfall, but in a lens that me and my co-author, Catherine Sayre, we hoped to sort of broaden it out to show what it means to deal with mental health issues in America. And one of Tony's big things was he was very big on happiness. He always wanted everyone around him to be happy. So we looked at this whole search for happiness that we all go through, and what that can mean and how it can actually be bad if you're only focused on happiness all the time. So the book does three things. It really traces his rise and fall, and also just looks at some of these very big issues that everyone in society is dealing with.
I think it sounds fascinating and very relatable, even though he was this, multimillionaire, this CEO, someone we would have looked at and thought, oh, he has it all. And there's more under the surface there. And so the title of your book, I think, is perfect. Happy at Any Cost. That we're striving for happiness, but we're suffering in order to do so.
That's exactly right. And in his case, it was, you're absolutely right that we tried very hard to make it relatable, because even though this is a billionaire, Zappos is owned by Amazon, he's sort of this, rare entrepreneur. These are issues we're all facing all the time. And so that was kind of our goal with this book, to not only tell his story, but to really have it be a lesson for anyone, whatever your stature in life is.
It's wonderful. There's still such a stigma surrounding mental health. So
there is, yes.
We need stories like this, because stories like this, unfortunately, through the tragedy of others, sometimes we become normalized. And that can help so many people to think we're not alone.
That's exactly right. And I'm here in the Bay Area for the Wall Street Journal, and I'm often covering these entrepreneurs and these tech titans and all of this, and they're always put up on this pedestal, such as Tony Hsieh was, and we're supposed to sort of worship them, and no one wants to see their struggles, right? With high performing people like that, and celebrities and CEOs, we just kind of especially turn a blind eye, because they become almost these superstars that aren't real people.
Right. And how do they get where they are if they don't have it all together?
Exactly. Yes. Well, and one of the things we actually looked at that was so interesting was whether or not you can actually get to that level without some sort of a mental health issue, if that makes sense. Like, you almost need to be a little bit autistic, or I'm not saying autism is a mental health issue, but do you know what I mean? You almost need to have some sort of characteristic like that to get to that level. So we
Absolutely.
just explored all those issues.
Well, there's
sure.
a statistic, and I won't quote it because I don't know it exactly, but this well-known idea that people in these really high positions, CEOs and billionaires, often have sociopathic traits and ideologies or idiopathies, because they, most of us, we don't strive for that kind of goal and that kind of just overreaching success. And it's not even attainable because we're emotional beings. And we
That's
have so much going
exactly
on, and we
right.
can't compartmentalize. So there's
Yes.
something a little different in the chemical makeup of these really big, successful people.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm excited to read your book, just doing a little bit of research just so that I could meet you and just even know who you are, what you wrote,
Oh,
and
thank
the
you.
story. I mean, it's fascinating. And I think participants, when they hear you speak and they talk about this, it's going to be so interesting and relatable that it's going to blow up. It's going to blow up. So,
Oh, thank you.
so would you please read a few lines from your book? Maybe the first few?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I would just back up for 1 second to explain that the reason I kind of got involved in this was Tony was in this mysterious house fire, as I said, in 2020. And that's where the book kind of starts. And at the Wall Street Journal, we were sort of like, why is this very well-known entrepreneur in a burning shed in Connecticut? He's from Las Vegas. So it was a mystery right from the start. So Catherine and I kind of took that mystery right from the start and ran with it. So the prologue is actually called A Freak Accident, and it starts in New London, Connecticut. And the book jumps back and forth in a way that readers, at least, have told us works really well between the current mystery of what happened in his death to his life and his rise to fame and some of these broader issues we discussed. Fire Chief Thomas Curcio drove across the dark neighborhoods of New London, Connecticut in the early morning of November 18th, 2020. The crackling sound of his car scanner, the only noise breaking the silence in his SUV. He had been awakened by a call to his cell phone around 3:30 a.m. by dispatch with reports of a fire and a person trapped inside a house or possibly a nearby structure. That wasn't unusual. New London is only 6 square miles with a population of about 27,000, but it is a densely populated urban area. Like someone took a slice out of New York City, his fire marshal, Vernon Scow, likes to tell people. The small department is busy enough on most days, handling about 7,500 calls a year. A large glass cabinet at the fire station showcases pictures and artifacts from some of New London's most memorable fires, large and small. A blown fuse at a fast food restaurant that had charred the inside, a Samsung cell phone that had exploded. And I'll say that these guys were actually amazing. I went and visited them and they drove me around the path they took to the fire and showed me the fire station. And this fire that ultimately, unfortunately, killed Tony Hsieh ended up as a picture on their fire station wall because it's very unusual for a billionaire to die in that community.
Wow. Yeah. And the idea that, I guess, and I don't know how much of this is true, but just going by news stories, he's at his girlfriend's house and maybe they have a fight. It's the day after Thanksgiving, early in the morning. He's gonna go sleep in the shed attached to the house, right? And it was 34 degrees. Mm-hmm. So he's got blankets and candles to keep warm and something about a propane tank. And I know they're trying to tie this to the fact that he was using substances, maybe even nitrous oxide to kind of...
Right, whippets, exactly. Yes. So no, you have it exactly right. The circumstances are just so strange. And we go into what led to that holding and also the efforts to save him, which were so sad. His dear friend was the singer Jewel, and she plays a large role in this, trying to get him out of his addiction cycle. And yeah.
Wow, I wondered about that. I saw they had interviewed Jewel. So again, your story, people are drawn to true stories, true crime, true mystery. And this fits all of that. You know, it touches on so many things, and also this very real aspect of mental health and where we maybe go wrong with our friends and loved ones. We don't see, because the surface looks so shiny and clean, and
Exactly.
we don't see the iceberg underneath.
That's exactly right. And I mean, Instagram and all these Facebook, it's like everyone looks so perfect and put together, and it's just not like that at all.
Right.
For sure.
Right. Well, thank you for that reading. It's a brilliant opening to a book. It draws us right in. It puts us right there. So I'm going to say a million times now, I'm super excited to read this book.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's actually, I mean, I'm biased, but it is a pretty fast read. It's not very long, and it's told in a narrative style, as you witness. So even though we tackle the broader issues, it's told like a story, really. So
very cool. So we talked a little bit about the mental health aspect and what you hope readers will take away from this is understanding that things aren't always what they seem, and there's more than meets the eye. Is there anything else you'd like to add to what you hope readers take away or learn from your book?
There's so much. I mean, the other aspect of this is just our search for happiness. Honestly, I learned so much about happiness, strangely, in this reporting, because Tony Hsieh's big mantra was happiness. He wanted to infuse ZAPPOS with this culture of happiness. And some of that is great. I mean, he was huge on customer service. You could call someone about a shoe order and they would talk to you for like 2 hours about whatever you wanted. You know, they just wanted to keep the customer happy. Employees were happy. They had all these parties, you know, they were always having fun. But at the end of the day, it just got kind of like too much. You know, it almost became really forced as he was struggling with his own mental health issues. It was almost like he couldn't admit that he wasn't happy. And he was so focused on the happiness of people around him, which is another thing I think we can all relate to, right? One person, I'll never forget this, compared him to that children's story we all love, The Giving Tree, where he would just give and give and give and never get anything in return. And I think a lot of us, you know, are really in danger of becoming the giving tree as well. So we also very much looked at the happiness aspect in our culture.
Absolutely. I immediately think about parents or people who are pleasers. You know, we want so much for everyone else to be happy that it's almost like we are in this mode of doing for others, and we don't stop to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves or that we're refilling the vessel so that we have more to give. And, you know, it becomes a sort of escape maybe, so that you don't have to face the truth of anything. You're just in this mode of doing and going here, going there, taking care of everybody else. And it's a dangerous pursuit.
That's exactly right. It's really dangerous, and it's easy to convince yourself you can just keep going, you know, everything's okay. One of the things that was so sad to me, I mean, much of this reporting was heartbreaking, but Tony had so many crazy issues that he just kept hidden. For example, he had facial blindness. So this can be a debilitating issue where you can't even recognize your own loved ones. And it's unclear how severe he had it because, again, he kept all this secret, but he developed all of these kind of coping mechanisms around it so people wouldn't know. For example, if you walked into a room, he would want to hear you speak, so he could recognize your voice. So he would like offer you something to hear you speak and then leave the room, kind of listen, and then come back. And it's sort of like hiding all this stuff. He could have just told people, you know, I have trouble recognizing faces, but instead he came up with all these workarounds, which is another thing that a lot of people, I think, do.
Exactly. And this is maybe just another aspect that confirms his genius, but also
Exactly.
shows how much he had to compensate and how much that can take out of you. And you're just burning the candle at both ends and depleting your ability to exist peacefully because you're constantly working to make up for perceived or real deficits.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And at the end, this was another sad thing. I spoke about how, especially in Silicon Valley, we tend to put these people up on pedestals, these famous entrepreneurs. And he was not even a real person. He was like a rock star. He was this business rock star, and people would come from all over to see how he had built this beautiful company and learn from him. And he had all these like actor friends and rock star friends because he was in Las Vegas, and his group of friends got much younger as he was getting older, and he became not even sort of a real person in the end, which is just so tragic. Yes.
It's more like he was a persona rather than a person, and
exactly.
had to keep up with that, which if we think about the extent to which he must have been doing that, to the scale at which he was doing that, I think most of us would say that's impossible, and he was doing it. So it makes sense that he was perhaps empty, thinking he was filling that void, or had to keep up the way he was always expected to act.
Absolutely. You mentioned one of the things I was so struck by was kind of how long he kept up the facade, right? It was actually kind of incredible to me that he made it so many years in the way he did, really. That was almost amazing in itself, in a terrible way, but you know what I mean.
Right. Wow. I think I could talk to you about this all day, but let's move on. Some of it for the readers to experience on their own. We don't want to tell them everything. So what are you working on now?
So I have a really great job at the Journal. I do tech investigations. So I often jump into breaking news. So this is actually how I got onto Tony's story. When he was found in that shed, we decided we needed to dig further, right? So in the last year, the other big thing I was working on is there's a very big video game company. They make Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, all the big ones. Called Activision, and they were facing a lot of sexual harassment allegations. So me and some coworkers really dug in to that. Recently, I've done a couple stories about Elon Musk, and I just kind of jump around to different topics. So yeah, it's always fun.
Do you get to choose some of your topics, and follow a lead and have control in that way?
I do. Yeah. Sometimes we decide based on kind of what is happening in the moment. Right. So again, that video game company, the state of California suddenly sued them, alleging all of this stuff. And so we thought we better dig in deeper and see what's really going on there. So that's kind of how we choose things.
Yeah. And I bet, time is of the essence when you get these stories that are very relevant, like Tony's death was in late 2020, and here it is March 2022, and your book is out.
Yes, it was extremely fast reporting. And with something like this, you just have to be so careful. I mean, we as Wall Street Journal reporters are like that anyway. We have a very high standard for fact checking, and we have teams of like standards peoples and lawyers that are always reviewing our work, and we took that to the book, right? And so that all takes time. And so, yes, it was definitely a lot of work.
Well, speaking of a lot of work, you have this great job that keeps you very busy. You are probably writing constantly. Do you have time to read? What are your reading habits, and what are you reading?
I do. I actually am a huge reader. I love to read. I will say that, okay, my fiction weakness is mysteries. I just love mysteries.
I'm not surprised.
Yes. And so I try to balance that though with nonfiction. And we have this amazing amount of nonfiction writing that comes out of the Journal because we're covering a lot of this. So a lot of a lot of those stories get turned into books. So, for example, I'm reading one about the PG&E crisis here in California that just came out, California burning. I don't know if you remember the story of that businessman, Carlos Ghosn, who just escaped financial fraud by like transferring himself in a box across the country. I'm reading that story. So I try and balance like these nonfiction and fiction. I think it's bad to just read mysteries all the time, maybe.
No, I'm a writer as well. And I lately haven't been reading, and I have all these books I've started, they're on my nightstand, on my Kindle. I've got a book in each room. And so I try to get little snippets in when I can, but I wonder if I should just dedicate one book at a time so that I can read it in a timely fashion and move on to another book or with my life.
It's so hard to make time. Yeah. So I always have one nonfiction and one fiction book going at the same time. So I can switch back and forth because like you, sometimes at the end of the day, I'm just too tired to read anything that's hard, and I think a lot of people are like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people don't read at all. Either they don't have the time, and so they don't get into it to be interested.
Exactly. Yeah.
Life is just so busy.
I know. I just love books so much, though. So I try and really make the time, but it's hard for sure.
Yes. But maybe necessary for those of us who are in this kind of this line of work.
Exactly. I really think I think I've met the occasional writer who is not a reader, but I think it's rare.
Right.
I don't actually know how you pull it off because much of my knowledge about writing is from reading, so.
Right. And the cadence and knowing, when you read other people's style and their voices, you're able to then more, I think, authentically develop your own. And so it doesn't sound so robotic or staccato or forced, writing should flow.
Right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate, everyone reading the book, and we really just hope that the story could be a lesson for everyone. Otherwise, I think it's not really worth writing about. So that's